Okay, so we are starting to record. Okay, so let me share the screen as well. Share the screen as well. Hold on. Somehow it's not showing. Okay. Okay, can you see the screen? Can you see the screen?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. So again, let me just remind you of the big problem that we are sort of, the one tangible problem which we are sort of addressing in this course. You know, the different aspects of this problem, and that again, I remind you, is this trapping a nanoparticle using light. And what we are doing today, basically, what we did till now, of course, is finding out we have a laser here and it goes through a birefringence plate. So it's like a half wave plate. And then there are some lenses which change the diameter of the beam. That part we haven't done yet, but then we have reflections. We have reflections from this mirror, and this mirror can either be a metal mirror or it can be a dielectric mirror. So then this also goes to this kind of a polarizing beam splitter. That is really interesting because that is made of a dielectric, and depending on what the input polarization is, it will allow a part of the beam transmitted and allow and reflect part of the beam. That part we have covered, and that is essentially given by the Fresnel transmission and reflective relationships, which essentially tell you how much of an electromagnetic wave, polarized electromagnetic wave, is transmitted or reflected at a dielectric interface, right? And then after that, we progress towards reflectance from metals. I mean, the optical properties of metals. And there, of course, what we saw was something pretty interesting. Metals have very, very different properties from dielectrics, and that you can envisage from generally some knowledge that you already had from even your high school. You know that metals are conducting. That conducting thing has big implications because that essentially means that the field does not penetrate through the metal, so that there is something called a skin depth, as a result of which the electric field disappears very quickly, which has a lot of repercussions, which sort of mean that the magnetic field is very large. That sort of changes things very drastically. We actually saw that the amount of energy in the magnetic field is more than that in the electric field. We saw that the velocity of the wave, both the phase and group velocity, become very much smaller than they are in dielectrics. That is something very, very interesting. And of course, the thing that I left for you as an assignment, that is to show that metals have very high reflectivity. That is very straightforward. So that is what we have covered till now. What we will do today and in henceforth is basically to look at things called optical constants. Optical constants essentially mean we are again looking at this issue of electromagnetic waves interacting with dielectrics, essentially, because there's a lot of very interesting physics there, because dielectrics uh, are essentially made up of we think that they're sort of having electrons which are not free, which are bound, and that basically means that they follow the harmonic oscillator model, as a result of which the electric field, the input electric field acts like some kind of a driving force, and that state means that there are some very interesting repercussions that happen, implications rather, depending on the frequency of the field, that is the driving field, and the absorption frequency of the electrons, or as we say in a harmonic oscillator model, the resonance frequency of the oscillator. which in this case is nothing but the absorption frequency of the electrons. So the optical properties of materials are very much dependent on that. So what frequency you come with while you actually excite and a material that responds to electromagnetic fields, that is really, really very interesting. And it gives a whole range of properties, which include as, as basic things as, the color of objects that comes from here, and also some extremely interesting things about, the velocity of waves inside the medium, depend depends very much on the frequency. So you might have instances where the wave velocity can exceed the velocity of light, which is not, however, unphysical, which we shall see. And we have things like the whole domain of properties completely modify depending on the wavelength or frequency of incident light on this material. So we will basically deal with that optical properties. Just these are also called optical constants of dielectrics. Also, you may think them to be like in dispersion properties, because what we are really looking at is how different material properties are, changing as a function of the frequency of the electric field. So this is also like dispersion properties of materials. From here, we will get into some very intriguing stuff where we actually look at a set of relationships called the Kramers chronic relationships, where you will see that the real part of the optical constant, which we have identified to be the refractive index, the real part of the refractive index, which is necessary for the wave propagation, how that actually is related to the imaginary part. That is quite fascinating, and the applications are very nice because you actually can predict absorption and emission properties of materials without actually measurement. You can just predict it from the transmission properties, which are very, very interesting. Okay, so the basic, the how it is important. For example, in a real practical problem, I can tell you this D1 and D2. I told you earlier, these are essentially dichroic beam splitters, which means that, so you have a beam which is incident on this that gets reflected, and I have another beam which is coming from here that gets transmitted. So these set of dichroics, D1 and D2, they are transparent and reflecting at different sets of wavelengths. So the same material, which is highly reflecting at a certain wavelength, will become transparent at a different wavelength. So this is partially understandable from the Fresnel properties, but what we are now going to see, we are just digging deeper. The Fresnel properties are just sort of, overall properties which do not go to the microscopic properties. What we are going to see is the microscopic properties now, because Fresnel just tells you, we look at boundary conditions of the electric field, what happens at the interface, just considering that the tangential part has to be continuous. We just take that, and that gives us very interesting properties. But now what we're going to look at is some very, we go right down deep into the basics, where we look at just, the picture of an electron, or like, lots of electrons, which, are bound to the nucleus, and how from that level, itself, you predict how the entire material is going to behave, which is quite fascinating, right? You're actually going to microscopic levels, to predict about macroscopic properties, which is really great. Okay, so let me start uh, the discussion. So essentially, as I said, what we are looking at is the optical constants of dielectrics, also dispersion properties of dielectrics of materials, which are basically dielectric materials, which have, so dielectric means which are sort of responsive to optical fields. Okay, so what do you think is the, root, what is, how does light, so okay, so we envisage this material to be at a very basic level. So you have some kind of a positively charged nucleus, some kind of a positively charged nucleus, positive nucleus, and you have some, it is separated by some delta x, and you have the negatively charged nucleus. I mean, sorry, electron, right? This is the model, and this is basically bound. These are bound electrons, and then what you essentially have, and so so basically the atom picture, if you think of it, it is essentially what it consists of. So it is charge neutral, but inside it, it essentially has a sort of some charge separation which exists, charge separation between positive and negative charges, that is existing charges, but that at the overall charge, you can say that this is an overall charge. The overall charge is neutral, but there is this thing that is present. And now what happens? You have an electric field that is instead of some frequency omega is incident, right? Incident. Right? So this is incident. So what does this do? So what does this electric field actually do? It is essentially playing with this distance here. So it is essentially causing this electron to kind of vibrate. I mean, if you I see if the quantum mechanical picture is easier for you, can think of this electron actually having lots of energy levels, accessible energy levels, and then the electric field comes with a frequency that is close to one of those energy separation between two of those levels, which causes this electron to absorb something from the field. If that picture helps you, then so be it. But otherwise, what one can just think of is that this electron has some, it is sort of vibrating. Okay, it is itself vibrating, but the electric field comes and it causes a change in the vibration of the electron, causes a change in the electron vibration, right? And that leads to a change in the charge separation, right? And because of that, you get some kind of a some overall sort of a charge comes in, and that is essentially called some kind of polarizability, or some polarization is induced. And what is that polarization induced? That is nothing but, if I say that, so you have essentially an induced polarization. Polarization means nothing but, you know, so if you think of the literal, meaning of polarize means what? Polarize means that you are kind of biased towards a particular opinion, or sort of, you think in a particular way or something like that, right? So here also that way, it basically means that this overall charge neutrality that gets somewhat modified in the sense that you get some, some sort of some excess, that the shift in that equilibrium. Okay, so basically that polarization is nothing but some E for the single electron. It is nothing but at E into delta x, which is this delta x. Maybe I should, this is what we had initially. So sort of, maybe we should not write this as x. Maybe we should just write this as some delta, whatever, some r or something. Better to not write the same thing, right? And this I am considering in some one particular direction, and this is essentially causing a little bit of shift from the equilibrium that was present, and that is the sort of polarization that it has obtained, that is given by this. And suppose you have, if you now have something like n atoms per unit volume, then the net polarization that sort of the atom acquires, this is given by a capital P. This is like a small. This is a capital P, and that is given like by some n e delta x. So this guy is nothing but the total polarization per unit volume, right? And so this is the basic thing that is happening. Okay. Now, if you think of like what are the properties of this, so this is again, I mean, it is quite clear that this polarization that is acquired, that polarization is obviously in the direction of the electric field, and it has to be proportional to the field, right? So if I now view it in a slightly different manner, I can ask the question, I can sort of frame the problem as, so, all materials will not behave. I mean, this charge separation that happens, right? This extra thing, that is material dependent, right? It cannot be the same for all
Sir,
materials.
one thing,
Huh.
sir,
Yeah.
sir, that delta x simply the displacement of electron,
Yeah.
only the
Of course,
displacement of
of course,
electron.
of
So
course,
when you are
absolutely.
taking that nucleus to electron is delta r, and in a particular direction delta s, that does not indicate, because you can take that in a delta r also. Means the
Yeah,
distance
yeah,
is
yeah,
not delta
yeah,
r.
yeah, 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 yeah. What I tried to mention here is that initially you had this kind of a charge separation,
Yes,
and because of the
yes.
field, this is what is happening. This should be very clear.
Hmm.
This can happen in any direction, but I want to distinguish
Yes.
these two. This is an
Hmm.
existing condition, and because of the
Yes.
electric field, you have this. I hope this is clear to everybody. But now, if I approach it in a different way, what I can say is what determines this delta x. You understand? Because suppose I have, say, glass, I have a piece of cloth, I have, maybe plastic, any kind of different material. What determines this delta x, right? So, in order to sort of qualify that or even quantify that, we approach this problem in a slightly different way. We write that this induced polarization is given by some kind of a susceptibility chi e. This is essentially telling you how much polarization will be induced. That is, if this is large, that tells you that the charge separation is large. This is going to be large. So the induced polarization is large, right? If this is small, then again, correspondingly, this is small, and the induced polarization is also small. So this is a more sort of a predictive kind of thing, in the sense that if I know this for a material, if I know this chi e, so this is called the susceptibility. And if I know this for a material, then I know essentially how this object will interact with the electric field. Okay, so that is very crucial. Okay, so now is this clear? This part is clear to everybody? I know maybe many of you are aware of this, but this is like a, just a refinement of concepts. Is this fine? Any issues, guys?
Sir,
Tell me.
you said that the polarization is always in the direction of the electric field and
Okay, this
proportional
is
to
okay.
it, but
One thing.
is
This
it
is for
always true?
no. This is very good question. This is not always true. This is assuming that I have an isotropic material. This is very good question. If I have an anisotropic material, then there is much more complicated stuff. Okay, for isotropic
Okay, sir.
material, this is always true. Okay, this is very
Thank you,
good
sir.
question. So this is, I'll note this. I'll note this, extremely good. This is Chitradeep, right?
No, sir, Anubhav.
Oh, Anubhav, good, very nice. So this is only for isotropic material. For anisotropic material, there is all kinds of interesting things which happen. We will actually get into this. This is very nice. So anyway, so now what do you think this chi e? This is like the susceptibility, as we said. So now let us think of like how this, what this susceptibility is all about, right? So what properties will it have? So first of all, do you think it will be real, or do you think it can be like complex? And why? Do you think it will just be a number, or do you think it can have actually, complex properties?
So I think it can be complex because there might be some phase lag between the
Very
applied
nice.
electric field and the
Very good.
polarization.
But why do you think? Why? What sort of physically can you try to explain that? That is the correct answer. But physically, why do you think that will happen?
Because like it won't react immediately,
Very,
like the
very good.
that's why.
So therefore, what Anubhav is saying, for large omega, the electron will never be able to respond to the electric field instantaneously, right? Cannot respond to E instantaneously, which basically means that, which essentially means that chi E has to be complex. There will be a
So why
phase
is
E.
that?
So basically, what I'm saying, so instant independent feature sort of a thing. So there will be a phase lag. So how do I represent phase? How do I represent phase,
Yeah,
guys?
that is fine, but that will be
Yeah.
complex if there is phase
So
lag. But
basically,
I'm
because
asking why there
uh,
has to be a phase lag.
yeah. The reason is that if the frequency of the field is changing very fast, then the electron, there will be a time difference before the electron interacts with it. So any kind of time difference basically means that the amplitude of the electron will be different from the amplitude of the driving field, which means there will be a phase difference. If there's a
No,
phase
but
difference, how do
why
I
there will
represent
be a
phase?
lag? That is my question. Rest is fine. Once that is clear, then rest
So
of the
because
thing.
it is bound, right? Because there is a Coulomb attraction between the electron and the nucleus, right? There's a restoring force, right? There's a restoring force, right? If you think of, so the model that we are assuming is essentially that of the harmonic oscillator, right? Which means there's a restoring force. I mean, what when I say there's a bound electron means there has to be a some kind of restoring force, right? So the electron will sort of resist any kind of motion that is coming from outside, right? What is the meaning of bound electron? Bound electron means that it is like a spring mass system, no? So spring you
Yeah,
think of,
that is
so
fine.
spring yeah, so then spring has a spring constant. No, what is the spring constant? A spring constant essentially means that if you give some kind of oscillation, if you give a kind of a perturbation, then it will sort of start, it will always try to get back to the equilibrium position.
Yes, that is fine. It will always try to come back to its original position.
Uh,
But
uh,
when you displace it at
uh,
that time, why there will
uh.
be some lag? It will be displaced right away, right? No?
No. That is the whole thing, right? If you have, so think of it. If the electric field is changing very fast, right? It's like a cause and effect thing, right? The electric field is going to change, and the electron has to immediately respond, and so the effect has to follow the cause. So I am saying that the safe assumption is that it cannot be instantaneous, because there can be, so if I say that it's going to be instantaneous, then I am assuming that there is immediate response. So that is not a correct assumption, because very crucially you have to have the effect following the cause. And if the cause is changing very fast, then it is safer for us to assume that there can be a phase lag. And we can actually prove that also, in the sense that if you just write down the equation of a bound harmonic oscillator, then you know that the solution that you take is complex, right? So that
Yeah,
basically means
sure.
there is a phase lag.
I think the better way to say
Uh,
this would be consider the example of a force damped oscillator.
yeah, that is
Then
what I'm trying to say, right? A
it
force
has its
damped
own
oscillator
original
is that.
frequency, and then you
Yes,
provide a forcing. It will try to match that frequency after some time.
it will. So no. But his question is like, why does the thing change? Why is there a force lag? I mean, why is there a phase? And the answer to that, as Rohan said, is that again, if there is a restoring force, means there is essentially a sort of a resonance frequency, its own sort of, that omega zero squared that we say, that is nothing but k by m, which is nothing but the restoring force. So obviously the sort of quantitative answer is that you have a sort of a original frequency or a resonant frequency kind of stuff, which is your given by the spring constant, right? But I am trying to answer you in the sense of, why is physically that expected? See, I can always write down the math, and it will follow, right? Because my model is, I have a mass, I have some damping, and I have a restoring force, which means that if I just sort of even normalize it, I'm going to get an x double dot plus gamma by m and a k by m. That k by m has the units of frequency, which means that is some kind of a inherent property of the system to vibrate in that kind of a frequency. So when you come, no, but then Rohan, that question can be that if you come with you have say omega zero, and you come with omega, why does it not instantly become omega zero? I mean, sorry, omega. That is the question that he's asking.
Yes,
I
that's
right. So I have omega zero. I come with omega. Why does it not immediately become omega? The reason is,
So,
again, every system has a finite response time, because remember, you are changing something from its initial equilibrium, and no physical process can happen instantaneously, in the sense there has to be a cause and effect. Just like no physical signal can travel faster than light, if you give actual, some kind of an external perturbation, that a physical system, will have to respond in a cause and effect manner. Instant
so,
change is not something that happens physically.
sir, we can think of this here. The effect that you're talking about is the polarization, right? And that essentially is
The
the displacement of
polarization, huh?
the charge
Yes,
density, right?
yes, yes,
So,
yes,
and it is caused by the electric field, so which is
yes,
basically a force on the
yes,
electrons.
yes,
So,
yes,
whenever force acts on an electron, it takes some
yes.
time to displace, right?
No,
It
but
doesn't
that,
jump
yeah,
directly.
Anirudh, his question is, why does it take time to displace?
No, it's a normal thing, right? Even if classically you
That,
have a particle, you
yeah,
apply force on it, it takes time to
it
accelerate
takes
it on,
time,
right?
exactly. So that is also what I'm saying. Any physical reaction will
If
take
you want to
time.
move an object, if you apply
Yes,
force, it
yes,
doesn't
yes,
instantaneously
yes,
move to point B, right? It takes
yes,
time to move to
exactly. No,
point B.
that is exactly what I said, right? Any physical process takes time. In fact, this cause effect, this causality, as we say, is the main reason you will see when we advance deeper, when that you have the Kramer-Stronach relationships. That causality, that everything has to follow, the effect has to follow the cause in finite time. It cannot happen instantaneously. As Anirudh said, if you apply force on a body, it will take time. It will never move instantaneously, because that means your acceleration will be infinite, which means that is not possible, right? So therefore,
Okay, okay, got it.
acceleration infinite is not possible. That is a good quantitative answer, I guess. Okay. So now let us. So that basically means that this has to be complex, which means I can essentially write this P as something like epsilon 0, some chi E1, say, minus, and okay, the reason of this minus will get apparent when we solve it at the end. This is just so this is essentially the physics driving me to write down the math. Okay. Now, what I think one question that came, I think Anubhav asked, is this true for all stuff? So this is very much true for isotropic material. For anisotropic material, however, it is more complicated. We will see that, this P also contributes to the displacement charge. This is essentially coming to from the bound electrons. And the final relationship actually is D is epsilon naught E plus P. And can you guys tell me what is the change that happens in sort of dielectric? So I can actually finally, okay, let me write this one more step, then it will be easier for you to realize. So essentially, we typically write this as in one line, this, okay, where this epsilon r, right, this epsilon r is nothing but 1 plus chi e, and obviously you also know that epsilon r is epsilon r1 minus I epsilon r2. Anyway, let me come back then. So we said that essentially P is in the direction of E and all that. But again, as I said, that this is very true for isotropic material. So can you tell me what can cause an issue once you know this? What do you think can cause an issue? That E may not, rather D, which is coming out of the the contribution of the bound electrons, that may not be in the direction of E, of the incident field. What happening can, what phenomena, or like what property, or yeah, I mean, what property in this equation, or what property of this equation can lead to this issue of D not being in the direction of E? What do you think? This is very crucial. This is basically physics, sort of getting understood or dictated by sort of a mathematical thing. Again, should I repeat the question? What I'm saying is, we assume that I wrote here that P
Yes, sir.
polarization is,
Please repeat.
no, yeah. So what I said was that polarization is in direction of the electric field, right? Now Anubhav asked that, is that true for everything? So I said that is only true for isotropic material. Something I said. Okay, forget what the meaning of the answer is. But what I'm trying to say here is, now you know this. I'm saying that displacement charge that is given by this, and this is the induced, this is the input field, this is the polarizability, and then this equation comes to this. I'm saying what properties of this equation, basically D is epsilon r, epsilon not epsilon r E, what conditions will ensure that my induced, this D is finally induced, it is sum of both the incident and the induced. So what condition will ensure that D is in the same direction as E?
Sir, the susceptibility can be a matrix which essentially say that
Exactly.
it
Very
can be
right.
different in different directions.
Very good. So susceptibility, say what you should say, Rohan, essentially is D is in the direction of E as long as epsilon r is a constant, is a number. I should say constant. Actually, constant is wrong because it may actually depend on frequency. It may not be a constant irrespective of frequency. Is a number. If epsilon r is a matrix, that implies D is not in the direction of E, and these are only true for anisotropic materials. Is this clear? Is this clear to everybody? I hope. This is very interesting. And see, this is again, we are going to visit anisotropic materials after a month probably, or even later. However, I hope you realize what this whole thing means. Okay, please realize what this whole thing means. Okay. So now let us
this
just.
ER can be negative as well, right?
Oh, well,
Epsilon R?
that is an interesting question. So that we will see in the sense that it is a constant. Oh, well, it is actually dependent on the refractive index. Negative in the sense for some materials at some frequencies, you will get constant values, whether it can be actually negative. Well,
Yeah, basically what point I want to make is if it is negative, then D will be opposite to the electric field direction, right?
No, see,
So
negative is a problem. See, because we actually know that your refractive index. No, which one are you saying? You are saying, are you saying the ER1, the real part? Or are you saying the whole thing?
the epsilon R, which is the whole thing, yes.
Yeah, the whole thing. Now that is just a
Yes.
phase, no? That can be negative, but that is just a phase. Yeah, that is absolutely possible. That is a phase thing. But if you're talking about this real part, that being negative, that is a problematic thing. Because see, that this is essentially root of this is the refractive index. Okay. So epsilon r as a real number, that being negative, that's an issue. So this one being negative is fine, it's just a phase. And as you're right, that is just meaning that the induced polarization is opposite. That can happen.
So
That is not a big deal.
in that case, that ER is a number. So if it is negative, then it
that
will
is
be
a problem. In the sense that number, but still it is a complex number. So it is a complex number. Okay, so complex number, there is a phase. So the phase, if it's pi, then it can be negative. Then it's okay. No, it's not really a problem. But if the real part, that being negative is a problem, because that basically means that the refractive index, that cannot never be negative. That can never be negative. That is basically, so when we will do it, when we go a little more deeper, we define the root of epsilon r to be the refractive index. Okay, so this epsilon r1, which is essentially associated with the progression of the wave, that cannot be negative. What you can have is, basically, the rate of change can go as negative. Actually, in some systems, you can get, extremely slow light and all, you can get. Well, yeah, I am actually not correct. So there are systems there are cases where at some frequency ranges you can actually get that, but it will never be zero. Yeah, so you will actually have n minus 1 that goes negative. Okay, n minus 1 becomes negative, but that does not mean that n becomes negative. Okay, so negative refractive index people do talk about, but that is basically the rate of change becomes negative and all. Okay, the dm daw becomes negative. Okay, so let us write down the formalism. So basically what we are saying, so essentially this is known as.
Sir, there is some kind of material where epsilon r can be negative.
Yeah, these are metamaterials are there. There are some artificial materials and all metamaterials where you can make that, but that is very complex. That we don't want to get into.
And then newer need to be negative also.
The permeability has to be. Exactly. So see, in the context of what we are doing now, I don't want to get into that. There are metamaterials and all where you can get final, refractive index negative, but that happens because the magnetic permeability becomes negative. So those are not natural materials. Those are artificially constructed things where you can do stuff. Okay, mostly there are materials in it. So that is very complicated. So I hope some of you will give a presentation on that actually. Okay, in your term paper. Okay. Anyway, so what we are now going to do was historically developed by Lorentz. Okay, so this is the Lorentz model where they consider essentially the treated electron treated as a simple oscillator which is bound to the nucleus. So this is developed by, I think his name was T. Lorentz, whatever, something like that. Probably you can check it out. Okay. So by the way, very importantly, this model can actually be generalized to include an isotropic medium. So by the way, let me just again clarify that a negative refractive index is actually there. It can be achieved, but it is, I mean, let us not get that into this discussion. Okay, that is much more complicated, and we can deal with that appropriately as time comes. But then epsilon being negative is not an issue. It's not. It can easily be negative. When epsilon the total complex number. Okay. Okay. So then what's up? Very crucially, we also considered this to be. So we consider the material to be consisting of, very crucial, this is extremely important, non-interacting electrons. This is extremely important, electrons. Okay, which basically implies that this is like a dilute. Well, you may ask that how on earth is this actually, this is like, well, this is actually like a dilute gas, but this is obviously not a gas. This is a solid. But see, this is how physics evolves. Okay, what we see is certainly, okay, please understand that this is not a gas. This is actually solids. Electrons are actually, if you really think of the structure, they are like arranged in lattices and all that. But what we are assuming, what we finally see is that the theory that we develop, that finally obeys experimentally observed results very well. And that tells us that, of course, there are assumptions. There are, different regimes where different aspects of the theory work better. But this is how we develop physics. Okay. We obviously, the moment you switch on interactions, the whole thing becomes much more complicated. But what we see is, under this assumption, if we sort of, whatever theory we develop, that obeys experimental results well. And that is the reason why experiments are so critical in physics. If you do not do experiments, you really do not know if the theory is correct, whether you have forgotten some factors, some elements, which actually would completely change the results of your calculations as well. Okay. So then very simply, let us just say that, that the equation of this pen is becoming of a single electron will be nothing but mx double dot plus some maybe we will write some m gamma x dot.
Sir, is this like Drude model applied to dielectric material?
Drude is slightly different. We will.
That is true for metal, but it's like since it's dielectric, the only thing is you have this oscillator bound to one nucleus.
But a Drude model is very similar. We will actually do the Drude model separately again.
So we have done in condensed metal.
Yeah, but here also for continuity we will do that. But then here the interesting implications will come, in terms of, the real and complex part of epsilon r, etc., etc. Those are very interesting. Okay, so in terms of optics, I think those are very critical. So I will just write this as say gamma x dot x dot plus kx. So in your condensed matter, did you actually look at the properties of the the epsilon real and complex and all that?
No, sir. We just
You just do the
considered
solution.
the
That is not enough. That is not enough. Absolutely not enough. Okay. So if I normalize by mass, this essentially becomes by some gamma x dot plus some omega 0 square x, which is some by m e0 e to the I omega t. Now you may ask, what is the origin of this gamma? This is very important, right? So this is like a damping. So for example, for just the ordinary pendulum, this is very easy to understand. This is just the collisions with the medium, you can say. So here, what do you think gamma can be? This gamma, what does it originate from? What do you think? This gamma?
Resistivity.
Yeah, so essentially that is kind of correct. So this is essentially coming from collisions, collisional energy loss, heat, yeah, which is basically etc. Okay. So obviously your omega 0 square is k by m, right? And so this, what is this omega 0? Omega 0, we should understand, it is nothing but, so why I'm writing this is you have to see, because for harmonic oscillator is very easy to understand. You let a pendulum, just hold the pendulum at the pivot point. Whatever frequency it oscillates with is the kind of the resonant frequency. Okay, but what does it mean in this case? That is very important to understand, right? So this is nothing but, in this case, it is the resonant absorption frequency of a bound electron. This is very crucial. And where does that arise? So that essentially leads to, what does it lead to? What is the manifestation is essentially vibrational, frequencies. So when you see a molecular spectrum, that is nothing but all this. Okay, vibrational frequencies of molecules, and then something like lattice vibrations of say ionic crystals, all those kind of stuff. Okay, lattice vibrations of ionic crystals, things like that. So the manifestation is that. So that's what I'm saying. So can you realize how powerful this harmonic oscillator model is? It is fantastic, right? Because just like what you think of a pendulum or normal pendulum just oscillating in air, the same thing, exactly the same thing, we are actually using to understand how electrons absorb from absorb energy and lead to spectra that you observe in case of molecules or atoms also. It's fascinating, right? How powerful that simple harmonic oscillator model is. Okay, so basically what we will just write down. So from here we can just, I think I will not do the derivation. I think you have done this. This is very straightforward. So thus this is nothing but x will be some e to the e0 e to the I omega t by some omega 0 minus omega square plus I gamma omega. Right? This is, I think, very, very well known. If you take trial solution and all that, just easily get it, right? So, so that means, however, now we have to understand that in the broader context, right? This is just for a single electron, I said, but then we can actually generalize this is very crucial. We are assuming that these electrons are non-interacting, right? So when we actually have multi-electron system also, we can basically write the final solution of the displacement of all electrons as some kind of superposition of the displacement acquired or displacement sort of driven by the electric field. Just a superposition of all the individual displacements. This is very important. We are doing this only and only because we are assuming that there is absolutely no interaction, right? So obviously you understand that what we will intend to do is we generalize this. I don't know how to increase this ink here. Is it getting? So anyway, we generalize for Ni electrons per unit volume. Do you think I can make this better? Volume and with, yeah, this is a bit better, with different excitation frequencies omega I and different gamma I. Okay, so just because they're non-interacting, I can write this so that finally I will write the polarizability that we defined then as some kind of summation over Ni e square by m divided by omega I square minus omega square plus some I gamma I omega I e 0 to the I omega t. This is a very important result. Okay. So basically, it should be very clear, however, that for a single electron, we know that, of course, if you now think of the amp. Oh God, this is getting very distinct. No? Can you read, guys? Can you read? Is it too indistinct? It's still readable, no? Or shall I slightly zoom out? Zoom in rather. Anyway, so for a single electron, what I can write, however, for single electron, if I write in terms of amplitude and phase, we basically have A as this.
Sir, what frequency is different?
Absorption. So basically these are different levels, right? So different levels and different levels. So see again, Rohan, what understand the logic. I am saying that I have n electrons at, say, at either an energy level or a lattice or whatever, something like that. I am saying that these are non-interacting. So what I have for one electron in that series, I can just sum. So I means one level. I equal to some 2 is one level, I equal to some 3 is another level, I equal to some 4 is another level, etc, etc, etc. Okay, basically that's what I'm trying to say. Anyway, I will just end today. Okay, I'll not write this here. This is really getting very. I'll just write this in. I will. So we will just do this in different slides. So I need to zoom out, zoom in actually. Not getting readable. So we will just end today. Again, let me just zoom in a bit so that you can see this better. And see this better. Okay. So this is crucial, however. This expression is very crucial. Let me just mark this. Oh man. So what makes this pen go like this?
If you zoom out too much, then it becomes thin, I think.
Yeah, so that's why I tried to zoom. Okay, now this looks better. Gamma I, and this one was at a gamma. Okay, so this is basically a very crucial relationship. Okay, so let us now, I think, start a new thing where I will just end today. So essentially, what I'm trying to say, I think, again, these are straightforward things. Straightforward things. So for a single electron, I can write down the amplitude and the phase, right? So single electron, basically I can write this as E squared by m by. Achha, these derivations are very simple. I hope there is no problem. Huh? This is something. If you are somewhat unsure, then please revisit the forced harmonic oscillator derivations. These are very, very, very trivial. So we have done this in detail in the second year class, but this is tan inverse gamma omega by, again, omega 0 square minus omega square whole square plus, oh no, this is not plus. But there is no square also. Acha. So now if I just plot these two, this is very simple. Okay, just phi is you basically need to assume the solution and then have sin x cos x and the square and add. And so please look at these derivations. So my one question to you is that I'll leave as a small, very simple homework for today. That is, if I plot these, where is, and I will ask you this, the max amplitude of, or rather I should not say where, at what frequency is the maximum amplitude of A. I will we will take it from there. So what do you think it is at? What is the answer to that? What is the answer to that? Maximum amplitude of A, does it come at what? Huh?
It won't be directly omega is equal to omega 0. It would be some
Correct.
gamma times omega 0.
Yes, correct. Not gamma times. So please find out that expression. It is not gamma times, Rohan. It is.
So I'm saying it would involve gamma.
Yes.
So it's something omega 0 plus gamma by 4
yeah.
or something.
Okay. So please do that. I want the answer from you tomorrow. This is a very small homework. What I want to, however, emphasize is, what makes you think? Can you physically argue why should the A max not be at omega 0? Why should it not be? Why should it not be at omega 0? What makes it? Is there any argument for that?
So the gamma factor
Because
adds
of the damping term that we had.
It's also some.
Hey,
yeah, the damping term also adds some sort of a force constant kind of a thing.
Some sort of what? Like, what are you? Force what? I didn't get the last thing.
Like it also adds some kind of a restoring force in some sense, not in terms of displacement, but in terms of.
Correct. So that is a very nice
answer. X dot.
Exactly. It is coming there.
So it will factor in.
Right.
It will factor in.
Right. That is very interesting. Actually, we will observe that when to all intents and purposes, so what is interesting is that this function we assume to be acting like a Lorentzian, but actually it does not, because this factor is there. Essentially, what we are trying to say is that because there is damping in the system, the resonance energy is actually the modified. So damping is very crucial, not just in slowing the system down, but actually changing some fundamental system properties as well. That is very crucial to actually absorb, to understand. The damping, the friction term that actually comes, that is something which changes. So you can think of it that what we are trying to do in generalized physics, what we actually do, what we are trying to do in a very broad sense, we are trying to find the response of the system. Response theory is a massive thing in physics, huge thing. It encompasses all kinds of different subjects. You come with a drive, you measure the response, and the response of the system changes both qualitatively and quantitatively with the damping. This is a proof to that. The damping basically, it's beautiful. So we'll explain it in more detail later on. So it actually, quantum mechanically, when we will write down the all the final things for epsilon r and all that, we will see that in the quantum mechanical picture, it actually translates to possible transitions to all levels. When the electron, suppose you come with an energy of some fixed amount, which is supposed to take the electron from state 1 to state 2. If there is large damping, forget about what the origin of the damping is. Suppose there is damping, it essentially means that the electron, instead of going from state 1 to state 2, can actually go to all kinds of different states. Very interesting. So it means that you are supposed to, there is some kind of a transition, whatever rule or matrix element, as we say in quantum mechanics, some kind of it should go from level 1 to level 2, where the difference of the the angular momentum is 1 or something like that. It should perfectly go to that. But you increase the damping, and there is a finite possibility for it to go from vibrational or whatever, some state 1 to state 3. There is a finite state possibility. So it actually reduces the accuracy, but it increases the overall coupling. That is very interesting. So we will discuss it later, but it actually tells you so remember, in a broader context of physics, what we are finding is actually the response function of the system when you actually are exciting the system externally. And the response function quantitatively and qualitatively changes in the presence of damping or friction. Okay, so ठीक है. So acha, any questions? Let me stop presenting and show myself for the customary time. Any questions? Or else we meet tomorrow same time. And yeah, I mean, I would still please ask the class to just solve this and get me. You have not told me the exact answer that I want to know. Exact answer of this question. How much is the exact frequency? You should be able to guess this, but please tell me. Somebody should tell me the answer before I solve it tomorrow. Okay? ठीक है. Tomorrow we meet. Bye.